Hello and welcome once again to this episode of Behind the Screens with me, David Hart, and my colleague, Mark McDermott.
Hello.
We always had this problem before where I don't actually think we do sound that much similar, but some people say...
Well, we had a conference call on Friday where they just couldn't
yeah.
distinguish between the two of us.
I'm sure in the past I've picked up the telephone in the office and your mum's been on the other end and she thought I was you. I don't think it sounded anything. Anyway, but you can see now. You can see.
Yeah, you can see the difference.
Yes. So, okay. So
I'm the good-looking one.
Yeah, I'm the sort of elderly, fading one.
See, that unfortunately, people think I look older because I've got more grey hair. It's bloody annoying.
Catching up. Let's do a podcast about our grey hair. Okay, so 2016. We are going to talk about being founders. This is one of the things, I suppose, the part of the purpose of this podcast or these podcasts is to talk about the kind of growing pains, if you like, of starting and scaling a business. And one of the things that you read quite often is that next to running out of money, founders falling out is pretty high up on the list of reasons that businesses fail. And my sort of proposition, I guess, is that the reason that founders fall out is because they don't share values. So we wanted to talk today about founder values and why it's important to have aligned founder values, and what goes wrong, I guess, when those founder values aren't aligned, and I suppose some of our own values and because I think values are more than just something that you kind of agree on. They're also like a kind of compass in some ways that help you decide when you come to a crossroads which way you turn. So in many ways, your values are what shape the journey that your business goes on. That sounds a bit sort of philosophical.
Well, yeah, and it's also kind of interesting because there's sort of, two obvious reasons. Well, one really obvious reason why it would go wrong. A lot in startup world, a lot of founders are young. They're sort of in their usually early 20s, early mid 20s, and actually the person they go found the company with, they just might not know that well, and therefore, how would they know if their values? Because their values haven't been tested yet, and yet certainly a startup will test them, and that's probably where a lot of that comes from. Is they simply just teamed up with the wrong person, probably because they just wanted to do it quickly, rushed it, or just didn't really know the other person. But then if you think actually, contrary to that, so that seems fairly obvious how they would make that error. It doesn't make it obvious why those values align, which I think is going to be the meat of this podcast sandwich. But I was just thinking as you were saying, I was like, but in family and friends, like friendship and your family connections, well, you could argue that your values are probably reasonably well aligned. And yet most people would say working with family or working with friends is a nightmare. How many times I hear that in agency, which is like, don't do a job for family or friends, and every time we did, it was a bit of a nightmare, actually.
Normally kicked us in the
So I suppose there's something interesting there. It's almost like you don't want to be too similar because otherwise...
Yeah, because I've had this conversation. I've had this conversation a few times with people. Like, so me, Mark, and Luke have worked together. We started our first business together 15 years ago, and we've worked together ever since.
But we knew each other before that.
We knew each other before that, but
not loads.
I wouldn't say this is horrible.
No, we weren't.
I wouldn't
friends.
say we're friends. We're not even friends now. Like we are.
Oh, mate.
But we're not like.
I'm on camera crying now.
I know. But I guess my point is, like,
you're off the fucking Christmas card list. If I ever did Christmas cards.
I don't think I've ever had a Christmas card.
I've never written one, but if I did,
I'm clearly not on
you would
list.
no longer be on it.
But he's got one. He's just admitted.
Until now, you would have been on it. And now you're off it. So there you go. You're definitely not getting a Christmas card.
It's a good job that we've got aligned values. Otherwise, we'd be
I'd be literally punching you.
So I guess my point is, like, it's not like it's like I don't really hang out with you every weekend, or with
no,
and I don't go on holiday. Me and Luke don't go on holiday together, or whatever.
Yeah. This is true. Yeah.
So it's slightly different. It's not like
we're not friends.
I mean, you're all right.
No. You're all right. You're just like death by 1,000 cuts. You're not the greatest guy, but you're not the worst. Yeah, I'll share a room.
But one of the things I was saying, it's like, so there's a difference between friendship. I guess my point is, because you're mates with someone, you shouldn't. That
serious
shouldn't
business
mean
podcast. Yes,
you should then go and start a business.
And in fact, it's probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, I mean, actually, so okay. If we because we'd say we're talking about values, but actually, what brought us together, apart from the bond of friendship, which will never be broken,
which is kind of like
it's like the ring. But what brought us together was actually mutual respect for our various skills. I mean, we worked together, not that much even, but we'd all seen what each of us does, and we could see immediately it was stuff that we didn't do but would need. So not that it was like, oh, I need that, so I'll take him, as it were, but it was clear from the outset. There wasn't like, there was overlap at the edges, but not at the core of what we did. And also you could see that like, it was a decent guy. Like, I mean, didn't know very well, but like was a decent guy. Decent guy, good at what he does something that if this thing's going to work, we would need. And would need not just as, we could employ that or outsource that, but like need as a fundamental need. And just to be clear about it, as far as I see it, and I'm pretty sure you'd agree, would be Luke on sort of deep technical, right? If you can't get your technology right, there's no point in starting a technology business. You'd be amazed how many people don't get that. Well, then I'll go to you next, because I think you're toward the other end, which is, business development, marketing, brand, sales. Back then, like you had the better network. You had much more experience of sales, of the process of sales, especially selling into businesses, and brands. And it was more. In fact, I would never really have thought you as sales, but you had that kind of company positioning and how to organize a company, how to put it together, things that would need to be done to make a company functional and work and actually have customers, so that the technical people could actually serve those customers. And then I was kind of in the middle, where I had been and was, I suppose, a developer, and could manage technical teams and could I was kind of implementer or operational. I could manage a team of designers, developers. That's basically it, really, back then. And get something from a brief to a go live product on time, make some money out of it, and have a happy customer at the end. And I'd done a bit of sales too, but I still was quite early in that journey at that point. Yeah. And if you've got those things, and then you add in all the other skills you can just add in, then basically what you've got is a small agency that would work. And that's probably why we started. Yeah. But that isn't where we've got to today necessarily. No. That's the germination of the...
But I think one thing we did early on, and this was your idea, so all credit to you, is you said, why don't we go off and just write on a piece of A4 paper what we think.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
What we think.
I've still got that somewhere.
Yeah, what we think the future of us working together would be like. So we both came back without too much direction. We both came back talking about how it would work commercially, like how big we would get, but also we both talked about our values, or the values of the company, and it was just so happened that those things. That probably was a coincidence. I mean, having said that, look, we worked together, we sat next to each other, and we got on well when we worked.
And we'd also seen what didn't work.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
And also we'd kind of supported each other through stressful situations.
Yeah, a bit of adversity.
So it kind of makes you sort of see people's real, I think, character then when you think
spirit, I think they call it.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so in some ways it wasn't a coincidence, but in other ways it was a coincidence. What we wrote was almost identical, and I think it's almost like I sort of alluded to this another time, but
if it hadn't, would we have stopped?
I don't know. Probably not. It was too late at that point. We just kind of disagree. Okay, well, we'll sort that
You could argue, it's good to have healthy debate.
Yeah, but it probably would have blown up. I would think, because if someone. Because it is stressful starting a business and all the challenges that come to it, and I think if someone was behaving in a way that wasn't aligned, it would be very easy to fall out. Which is why people do fall out, and it's not necessarily that someone's an idiot or whatever, but just like I just can't work with this person. Like when push comes to shove, and we've had it. So we've been involved in other businesses where we've been minority shareholders, and there's been other people on the board whose values we didn't share, and it was impossible to work with them.
Yeah, and they would probably say the same about us.
Yeah, they'd probably just say, those guys, whatever. Yeah. But
these guys think they're absolutely right.
And not that we came out, but when we came out fighting together, like we were naturally on the same side, even though we were on the same side anyway, because we were. But it wasn't difficult.
Yeah, we didn't have a sort of conflab before and go, right, you say that, I'll say that, and it'll nicely dovetail into a great argument. I mean, that wasn't anything at the time or even.
So I do wonder whether
knowledge.
there is some value in startups doing a kind of almost like a prenup. It's not quite a prenup, but go off and write down your vision and your values.
A bit of a try before you buy.
Yeah, and just see if it matches. And if it doesn't, so take it. Maybe it's not the end of the world, but imagine, for example, you were in a business. You ended up you did a startup, and you ended up in business with a young Donald Trump, and who had certain views about the way you treat women or certain whatever. I'm disparaging. I'm sure he's a I don't know what he is, but
he's clearly not lovely, is he?
You've seen certain views that he has,
and
you just
actually like him would say that.
But you might think, well, actually, either you might go, actually, that's exactly the sort of person I'd like to do business with. A counterpuncher, someone who doesn't back down ever.
My yin to my yang.
Yeah, or you might go, actually, that would annoy me so quickly that I couldn't actually go into business with that guy. So I wouldn't trust him. And that's the other thing about I've said this before, like, other than my wife and my family, I trust you and Luke more than anyone else in the world. And you never say
like me very much.
never say never, but I would be, it would be really devastating for me if one of you screwed the other one over or screwed me over, because not only would it be horrible, but it would just, I just think I wouldn't, that's the sort of betrayal of trust. Going back 15 years, I just would be so surprised if that happened. Obviously, you never know what it's like. Your wife, you never know absolutely that you can trust her.
Yeah, I mean, well, so there are a few things going through my head there as you were sort of talking through that, and I think one of the interesting things that you were talking about there, I was wondering if we should separate out character versus values, if there is a separation, because see, I think there's two things here, right? So in adversity, character is what comes out the most, because I mean, it's easy. Everyone's nice when you're winning, right? It's kind of weird not to be. But when things are going like really bad, like you're under lots of stress, lots of pressure. That for me is a test of character. Now that's kind of like, can I get through this stressful scenario with someone of this character, and can they vice versa do it with me? Because I think there's really three things in life. There's good, bad, and then there's grey. And I think values come into it. Because when you're under like stressful situations, stuff's going wrong, you don't really have enough time to think about like what are our values. You just got to act and sort it out and fix it. And that for me is that test of character. But when you're grey, see, grey for me is like, it's the unknowns. The unknowns are where values come in, because you're looking at a decision where both, let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that there are two scenarios, but they're quite different paths. And there's a really strong argument for both, right? It's not going to be down to your character which path you take. Well, it could be if you're sort of a Trump, because you'll just do what Trump would always do. But if it's down to your values and you don't know what to do, you're equally torn, your values will guide you towards that. And that's where I think founder fallout probably comes from most, is there's just a lot of unknown.
Yeah. For me, I think I've sort of said this before, in that it's about, so when you have a disagreement, so we've disagreed a lot. We don't disagree all the time, but we've, over this, it would be impossible over 15 years for the three of us never to have a different opinion about something. And
I would say it's almost a weekly occurrence.
Yeah, and what normally happens is if someone feels very, very strongly about something, they are probably the one that wins that argument. So it's like, guys, honestly, trust me on this one. I really, really think this is the right way to go. The others go, well, I don't feel that strongly. I disagree with you, but I don't feel as strongly about it as you do. So, you go for it. We'll back you. And I think part of the thing about this is, if you know that your co-founders share the same ambition, so the same destination, then really the disagreements are around the journey. So you can't, and for that reason, you shouldn't really get upset if someone disagrees with you. So if someone says, like, we've got to get to the other side of town, I'm going to get the tube, and someone says, well, I'm going to get the bus. You're not going to, ultimately we're both trying to get to the same place, but just because I have a slightly different view about how we get there doesn't make me, it's not like I'm turning around and saying,
also
you're an
knowing
idiot.
full well that there's scenarios that where both of those things win,
Yeah.
and in scenarios where both of those things lose. And if it turns up being your one that wins, then you should also be just as cognizant of the fact that it could also have been the one that lost too.
Yeah. So I think that in many ways, I mean, some of the values that we have are probably around things like doing the right thing, being fair, doing what we say we're going to do. That's something that we've always kind of, there's been examples where we haven't necessarily had to do something, but it felt like the right thing to do. And I think all of us just go, yep, I agree. It's a bit shit for us, but actually, we did say this and we're honourable people, and there wouldn't be any kind of discussion about that. Or there might be a discussion about it, but there wouldn't be, definitely wouldn't fall out about it. But someone else might go, no, fuck off. We're not giving that guy that money. He doesn't deserve, or whatever it is. A really simple example that was before Christmas when you were interviewing people in our new office in Belfast, and there was a woman there that was the best candidate. It was a full-time job, but she had young children and wanted to not work 5 days a week. And you sort of said to us, she's the best candidate, so I've hired her. I didn't check with you first because I kind of knew what your answer would be. And that I think that's an example of kind of if you've got aligned values, it makes it easier for you to make decisions quickly. It means you don't get bogged down in argument after argument after argument. I mean, that example that I said earlier about where we were on a board with people that we fell out with. I mean, we would spend hours and hours and hours arguing about nothing.
A button color.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what, this is horrible. Whereas, with us, it's like, even if someone goes ahead and does something, you think I wouldn't have done it that way. You kind of think, yeah, but I know where they're coming from, and I trust them, and I trust their judgment, and there's never, as you say, there's never really been recriminations, even when one of us has done something a bit dumb or messed up. Not even dumb, but even just dropped the ball or something. I don't think we've ever turned around and gone, that's really out of order, because it's not been out of order. It would be out of order if one of us had done something that was fundamentally not aligned with our.
So that's quite interesting too, because obviously our founder journey's been quite interesting in the fact that we've had. So I say interesting again. Our founder journey's been long. Before it's got to this point. I mean, obviously, if ScreenCloud goes off and does become something, special that we really want it to, history will write the books that it basically everything began in 2015. That's normally what happens, doesn't it? In these things, it's only the real history nerds that will then go back to 2004 and be like, oh, I think you'll find. But maybe to talk about founder fallout, like how many founders have started their startup journey with. Well, what were we on by then? We were on almost 12 or more years of actually collaboration and working together prior to that even kicking off. And I think what you were just saying there is like a bank of trust has been built up over consistent patterns of behavior for long periods of time, which obviously if your startup's fairly new and only in your first year, then you don't have that reserve bank of trust and kind of faith in you, do you?
That's true. Yeah, because that if someone's kind of not going a bit rogue, but you're just like, okay, last few months you've been a bit whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
you kind of know
if
where
you
they're
really
coming from.
honestly look back over the last sort of 15 years, I can. If I was to break it into years, just to be simple about it, I'd be like, I was really flying that year, and I'll be like, you know what? I don't think I was quite on my game as much that year. Like, honestly, I know there've been years where I'm like, you know what? Things were all good. Everything was kind of in a good place. I was in my element with the kind of work I was doing. I kind of think of highlight years for me personally. I'm kind of think 2008 was a really good one, even though, well, apart from obvious, but personally, I was working on projects which I absolutely loved, doing the work I enjoyed. I really liked the people. Personal life was all good. Like it was good. I'm just picking one, but But I can't remember, but maybe 2008 wasn't your strongest year. I don't know. I can't remember, but and I wouldn't even really be thinking about it. But like, I know that there's inconsistency in performance personally. I'm sure the same for you. And obviously, I wonder, not to put an example, but because I know exactly why, but do you remember just after you had Max, I think it was, like Max wasn't sleeping very well. I think you were really tired. Remember that proposal where you basically left out like a massive chunk of costs? 4 Music. Do you remember that? Where basically we won the job, but they actually said, look, you've won it because you're actually the best people, but your quote doesn't make any sense. And if you did it, you'd probably kind of bankrupt yourselves. Do you remember that? They actually gave us a chance they gave us a chance to go back and re-quote it and basically add about 40% more of the costs on, because you literally just left it out. It's not like, and it was no negligence or anything. I know exactly why. It's because you were knackered. You were really tired. And the fact you'd even written the proposal at all was kind of testament to like perseverance through extreme tiredness. Now I'm not saying, but I'm thinking, like I remember that one just because I remember the client going, is that the first time a client has ever asked you to add 40% onto a bill so that they don't hurt you? I was like, respect to that guy who asked that. But I mean, inevitably that wasn't just because of one sleepy night. I remember that you were just tired, and you weren't as good as you were in other years because you were tired. Sorry, I don't know if that's. I feel bad almost picking one thing out, but
I suppose what you're saying is, like if that had been the first time you'd ever worked with me, you would have gone,
I might be like,
this guy's an idiot.
This guy says he's strong on new business, and then he basically almost kills us in our first deal through something which is, I mean, it's not even a slight error; it's a glaring one. And like, I'm trying to think of like, I remember years if I kind of had like a bad breakup or something going on, and I think, it definitely wasn't at the races properly, that one. Like there's all sort of those sort of things.
Yeah, I think I suppose this comes back to character a little bit as well. It's like if you know someone really, really well, you also know where their flaws are, and you also kind of, you're more forgiving in a way that other people aren't. And actually, that can internally people might go, that's a bit, or. I mean, again, I don't want to use examples, but I think
we're just going to end up picking out all the things that we've both done badly in the last 15
actually, I was thinking more about Luke on this one. Actually,
okay, the man with no right to reply.
But there was.
He's too busy to watch.
I don't want to give be too specific, but there was a time when there was criticism of Luke and how kind of productive stuff coming out of his team was. But actually, I think for you and me, because we've known Luke for a long time, we know how he works, we know what he doesn't respond to and what he does respond to, and also fundamentally, I know that Luke works really hard and has certain kind of standards that he wants to. I kind of trust him. I might not necessarily say, I can trust. If Luke says something's going to happen by X, then it will definitely happen by X. But I also know that he's not sitting around doing nothing. If something's been delayed, he's got a real reason why it's been delayed, kind of thing. Now, you might not agree with that reason or whatever, but it's sort of, again, if you were just literally coming into a business with him and something like that happened, you might go, whoa, what's this guy?
Yeah,
and I think that's partly sort of knowing each other's flaws. And everybody, one of the, do you remember very, very early on in Cogent, I think we had a mentor called Nikki Phillips, and she said, the thing you guys need to remember is that you can't make someone be the person you want them to be. You have to kind of embrace who they are, and that includes their flaws, and that includes what they're not good at.
I remember that. I mean, a lot of Nikki's early advice to us was like superlative wisdom, which I still kind of think about quite a lot today. And because she has this, like, I don't know if it's instinctive or just I think it's probably a combination of experience and instinct, but she just fundamentally understands people, but not just the people that she understands all types of people. There's really kind of unbelievably high emotional intelligence. And I've really brought that forward. Like, I mean, I know that you can't change people. I don't think you can. People can improve, and also people can like, what's the opposite of improve?
Deteriorate.
That sounds a little bit like a limb might fall off, but like a zombie. Oh, there's the arm. But they can. Let's just say that there's a range in which they will operate, like of a bit higher, a bit lower. But in terms of like fundamental. Think of how many people in your life who've completely reinvented themselves. Probably the only people I know of would be, I say, former addicts who've managed to like kick it. But then you would argue that whatever that was they putting into it was creating a different version of themselves anyway. So they're probably just going back to what they would have been without the external force kind of forcibly changing them. But it's like, it's like, if people are drunk and go, oh, I was drunk. I'm like, yeah, but actually it's just a version of your character. Like, because not all drunk people respond the same way. It's like, oh, as if, oh yeah, beer made it happen, or wine or spirits or whatever. It was like, yeah, it influenced it happening, but it came from within. So again, like you say, accepting people for their flaws, like you can want and wish them all away. They're not going anywhere. Like me and probably punctuality, I have improved it. I must admit, I am much more punctual than I was, but probably by normal standards, I'm probably still quite bad.
Yeah.
But I'm better than I was. But I know. But I'm operating in my higher level of my 20% zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess coming back to values, and I suppose for us that was never a critical value necessarily. So I think where things go wrong is when one of the founders, let's say you have. You might not have codified it exactly, but there is a sort of an established, these are our kind of values. So it might be around honesty. It might be around bravery. I mean, that's one of the things I think we've always kind of like, we have been brave. We've done a lot of things. A lot of things have not worked out for us. But
not many people have dismantled their own business on purpose.
Yeah.
To try and build a new one, which may or may not work.
Yeah. And I think collectively, that's something that we've said, we're prepared to take this risk. And also because we know that we're supportive as well. I guess it's another kind of, that we know that if one person does something, it doesn't work out, the other two aren't going to turn around and go, right, what the hell? But I think the reason where it does fall down is probably when you have those kind of values, whether or not they've been written down or not, and one of the founders goes against those values. And that's probably where things start to go wrong.
Yeah.
So if for example, let's take this bravery thing. So one of us went off and did something and it didn't work out. And then the other one turned around and just said, I don't know, wanted blood or wanted, I don't know what the kind of sanction could be, but let's say they reacted in a way that wasn't supportive and wasn't kind of, that would probably be enough potentially for someone to go, you know what, if that's the way you think, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, there would be a lot for us now because we're so invested. That would have to be quite a big thing. But you can imagine early on in an organization, we haven't got so much to lose. If someone just turned around and said, oh, you know what, the way you've behaved, that's just not me. I can't see myself working with you anymore. I mean, put it this way, some of those businesses that we started where we were minority shareholders, how many of them were you ever tempted to go, I would love to give up Cogent or whatever I'm doing at the moment and go and work full time on it?
Not once. Not once. But that might be more to do with the fact we really picked some bad people to work with. But I wonder another thing, as we were sort of talking there, I wonder, just going back to that thing about, us even kind of coming together a bit in adversity because of sort of slightly, not toxic, but slightly crazy culture of the place where we met. I wonder if, because like the world is quite tough, like, I mean, whether it means to be or not, but I don't think the world even has a kind of an awareness of itself. It just is what it is. It's just a random.
It's not deliberately.
It's just a random series of events, just kind of all clicking around. But like if you take like raising money, it's brutal rejection, especially at the early days. Even without meaning to be, quite often a lot of customers can be pretty nasty, or can certainly touch on sore points without necessarily meaning to. There's loads of things which basically are pretty tough and pretty, they'll sort of get you. And in effect, with your co-founders, you should always feel like it is a sort of, I don't want to say it almost safe space, but it is a place where at least that whether they're different or not, they are fundamentally in the same boat as you. Yeah. And they want things to work out in almost exactly the same way you do too. They're going to play a different role in making that happen because, massive duplication is pointless. But they want this to work too. And that is quite a reassuring place. When everything else doesn't look very reassuring, such as running out of money, can't raise investment, customers don't seem interested, maybe staff are leaving, staff kind of losing faith, whatever it might be. I mean, we've been through.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember
staff turning around and saying,
"Yeah,
you're wrong, or you're stupid.
You're wrong, or we don't believe in this anymore."
Yeah.
I mean, I remember there were days in the agency. There were some years where we had really high turnover, and you just got the feeling that all the wheels were properly coming off, and it was about to collapse astoundingly, and that's why I just think if you're a sole founder, I just don't even understand.
I've got a lot of respect for people like
I
that,
don't
but
know.
also just wonder, are they a certain type of person?
I'd really like to.
It's got. I mean, I think
I hear so many investors now won't even touch a sole founder business anymore.
Right, but you can. I mean, I remember when we were, so when we were first starting up ScreenCloud, so Mark and Luke went off and were kind of pretty much on ScreenCloud full time, and I was trying to get rid of our other interests. So, and that coincided with us trying to raise money for ScreenCloud.
It was actually you obviously to ultimately get rid of them, but actually at the beginning was to keep them going so they could help fund it.
Yeah, so there's a kind of.
So you didn't want to get rid of them at that point because we needed them to bankroll it.
It would have been easy just to get rid of them. We could just switch so basically, kind of what we were trying to do is a soft landing. So we would. In an ideal world, just as we got funding, we would sell the agency,
land the plane, but not quite with all engines working.
Yeah. So that was the plan, and that was but there was a time when, I mean, that was very difficult because I was working on sort of 3 or 4 different businesses at the same time, and the MD we had of our agency went on maternity leave, and that really felt like the wheels were falling off. And if I was doing that, even though I was kind of doing it on my own, I wasn't doing it on my own in that I could still vent to you guys and get your opinion and your advice on how I should do. And also, I suppose to an extent, sort of encouragement, not that you were going, you're doing a great job, mate, or anything like that. It wasn't so much that, but it was just like, you completely knew what I was going through and,
didn't think, and appreciated it was not easy.
And you weren't,
and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. You weren't sort of saying,
think of it in like I kind of think of it almost like a movie. It's kind of like some kind of like adventure movie where, the team is up against it. There's some sort of mortal threat coming one way. So half the team is fending that and holding it back.
Yeah.
And the other half the team is trying to figure out how to get an escape route.
That's exactly what it was like.
And it was like, okay, so you're like, okay, I think I can hold it another 20 seconds, but really, if you could find... My arms
getting really tired now.
If you could find that shaft of light so that we can get out of this freaking mess. I'm like, I'm getting there. But my shovel is a spoon.
I rember us going to the pub after we pitched to Rob and those guys. And I was really tired and with it. My arms were shaking and, simultaneously pitching ScreenCloud, which I didn't know enough about.
Yeah, you didn't even really know all the features.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten. I hadn't actually even really told you what it did.
Yeah,
I mean, under the hood.
But also, trying to sell. It was. Yeah. Anyway, it's another story.
Selling a dream whilst living a nightmare.
Yeah. But I remember going to the pub with you afterwards, and you were like, you got to believe me. This. All the signs are really, really positive. And it was a really reassuring moment, and it's because I knew that you weren't a bullshitter, because I've worked with you for a long time, and I knew that you wouldn't say that. You could have been wrong still, but I knew that you genuinely felt it in your heart, and I trust your judgment and worked with you a long time. I don't know. Yeah, it was a terribly traumatic few years, but the other thing is that we made a decision again as a collective that this was the plan. And it was like, our plan is to stop being an agency and focus full time on ScreenCloud. We didn't know quite how we were going to do that or how long it was going to take, but we had a plan. And as long as we stuck to the plan, then we would get there. And that was what all 3 of us believed. And I think, that there's a real lesson there. Like, have a plan, stick to it, and basically by hook or by crook.
But we didn't have exact dates and stuff. But we had the plan. But as you do, I think another thing I was going to add there was like, what's always been quite interesting, and maybe this is very much because of value alignment. When we have had to, when it's been the time to make the big decision, the conversations have been relatively short.
Yeah,
and I remember the moment that the penny dropped for me, the moment it was to switch from using agency to try and stay afloat, to keep ScreenCloud going, to the point where we now need to jettison this agency over because we need to now move over to here, and this has now become a distraction, not a sort of life source.
Yeah.
And I remember it was that one evening in summer, I'd flown back, and I think we did some pitching in the afternoon for ScreenCloud Investment, and then we went back to the agency afterwards. There was a particularly good atmosphere in the office. It wasn't a bad one, but it was pretty flat. Everyone had buggered off. It was just me and you sat on the sofa. I think it was in August. And I just remember going to you and going, it's time. It's time to sell this. And you went, okay. And then I think, I can't remember the exact, how it went from that, but I think you literally went, yeah, I think so too. To sell a business, we started in 2004 in what felt like a 2-minute decision. And we didn't even need to go, well, before we go any further with this, we should really call Luke. Like, we knew what he would say.
Yeah.
We knew what he would say. He probably wanted to have done it before, if anything.
He would have done it before.
We went to the pub. We had 2 beers. We figured out a quick plan for then how we would now jettison. And I think I went back to the airport and flew back for my holiday, which I kind of had to sort of cut short.
Yeah, God, I forgot that.
Yeah.
For a day. Yeah,
flew back for 1 day.
Yeah.
But actually, what you could argue was, oh well, I hope they've given that due care and thought maybe months long and hard about it. I honestly think the conversation 5 minutes, the plan, well, however long 2 beers takes to drink, and then we're off. We're done.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think
if you're not aligned, there's no bloody chance you're going to do that.
Which comes back to what we said earlier is one of the things about values is not only does it shape your journey, but it makes decision making 100 times
easier.
quicker.
Yeah.
And it stops you from getting, you can have disagreements, but have disagreements about productive things.
And it wasn't exactly, I particularly pitched it brilliantly to you. I think I just went, feels like the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not exactly the most compelling choice. I've done some gap analysis, and I think this is now the optimum time to sell our agency. It was more like, fuck it, I think this is it now. I think this is the time to do it. And you're like, yeah, because you were feeling it too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh God, where are we on now?
Yeah,
that was going to be a short one, wasn't it?
No, I think this one's actually been longer than we.
Oh bloody hell!
So I'm sorry, we've been rumbling on. Again, part podcast, part counselling,
part therapy. Yeah,
therapy. Yeah.
If anyone wants to come for a session,
yeah.
We don't hello at screen.cloud.
Yeah. But so I suppose I guess we've sort of been lucky in that we shared our values, but then we wouldn't be sitting here if for whatever reason we didn't have aligned values. So it wasn't really planned. It's coincidence, but that's probably one of the reasons why we're still sat here 15 years later, even though we're not
mates.
Even though we're not drinking buddies. And, God, I wish I hadn't said that now.
No. It was funny. I probably over-egged it, really.
You know what I mean?
I thought it was quite funny.
Yeah. What I mean is we don't hang out with each other.
I know.
So you're my daughter's godfather.
Yeah,
exactly. I know your parents very well. We are pretty, we probably talk, the three of us probably talk almost daily in some form or the other, I guess that's
longer than most marriages.
That's true. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Until next time.
Cheers. Bye. Oh, hello. I forgot about the camera.